My friends, the Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. When Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered around him, and he stayed close to the sea. One of the synagogue officials named Jairus came forward. Seeing Jesus, he fell at his feet and pleaded earnestly with him, saying, "My daughter is at the point of death. Please come lay your hands on her, that she may get well and live." So Jesus went off with Jairus, and a large crowd followed him and pressed upon him. Now there was a woman afflicted with hemorrhages for 12 years. She had suffered greatly at the hands of many doctors and had spent all that she had, yet she was not helped, but only grew worse. She had heard about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. She said, "If I but touch his clothes, I shall be cured." Immediately her flow of blood dried up. She felt in her body that she was healed of her affliction. Jesus, aware at once that power had gone out from him, turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who has touched my clothes?" But his disciples said to Jesus, "You see how the crowd is pressing upon you, and yet you ask, 'Who touched me?'" And Jesus looked around to see who had done it. The woman, realizing what had happened to her, approached in fear and trembling. She fell down before Jesus and told him the whole truth. Jesus said to her, "Daughter, your faith has saved you. Go in peace and be cured of your affliction." While he was still speaking to her, people from the synagogue official's house arrived and said, "Your daughter has died. Why trouble the teacher any longer?" Disregarding the message that was reported, Jesus said to the synagogue official, "Do not be afraid, just have faith." He did not allow anyone to accompany him inside except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they arrived at the house of the synagogue official, he caught sight of a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. So Jesus went in and said to them, "Why this commotion and weeping? The child is not dead, but asleep." And they ridiculed Jesus. Then he put them all out. He took along the child's father and mother and those who were there with him and entered the room where the child was. He took the child by the hand and said to her, "Talitha Kaum," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, arise." The girl, a child of 12, arose immediately and walked around. At that they were utterly astounded. And he gave strict orders that no one should know this, and said that she should be given something to eat. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Jesus Christ. Well, hello, everybody. Father Frank has been very gracious. He's such a gracious, hospitable person since I moved into the rectory this past Wednesday, and he graciously invited me to speak, to give a homily at all the masses by way of introducing myself. As he mentioned at the beginning of Mass, my name is Father Joe Schlafer. I was ordained a priest for our diocese in 1975, and in the last 49 years, I've been working as a parish priest in about 6 different parishes on Long Island. And priests, the guidelines for retirement are usually 72 to 75, and when I realized last March that I was 76, I thought, I got to start thinking about what I'm going to do for retirement. And again, Father Frank, who is Mr. Hospitality and Graciousness, said, why don't you come and live in Curie-Vaz and help us there? And besides thanking him for that marvelous invitation, I realized what a gift it was to be invited here. For me especially, because it happens to be the parish where I was born, where I was baptized, where I grew up, where I received all my sacraments. My 5 brothers and sisters and I all graduated from this school. And even when I was ordained a priest, this is where I came back to do my first Mass. So this is really like coming home. You know, a lot of priests, when they retire, they look for a place to go. To be invited here by Father Frank is such an incredible gift, because all of us, meaning my brothers and sisters and I, have such positive and good memories of Curie-Vaz. Coming here every Sunday, worshiping together, going to that school. And my own vocation as a priest was nurtured first here. The other day I went back to that little chapel that's dedicated to the Blessed Mother. I went back there because that's where the baptistry used to be. And it just made me like marvel. This is where I was baptized. What a gift to be with you. None of my family still live in the parish. And parishes change. New people come in and people move on. And I realize that this parish is certainly different from when I left all those years ago. But the vitality of this parish, the energy of God's love that's working in all of you, is still so present, which I find so encouraging. In the last 3 parishes where I was stationed, I was the pastor. And I was joking with Father Frank. I said, one of the gifts of coming here is not to have to be in charge. So that if anybody asks me a question, I think it's such a great thing to be able to say, I think you have to ask the pastor. But another great thing is that I won't refer to Father Frank as your pastor. I'll refer to him as our pastor, because now I'm a member of the parish. And I'm just so delighted to be a member of this parish. Not just because of the good memories of growing up here, but because of Father Frank, who would probably not want me to say this because of his humility, but I have to say that he is a priest who is known by so many countless other priests on Long Island and priests outside of this diocese. And those of us who know him and love him look up to him as an example of priestly devotion and as a sign of hope to all of us priests. And that's very much part of the gift of being here today. Now, I know homilies are not supposed to be about me. They're supposed to be about the scriptures. And maybe I could talk about my coming here in terms of today's readings, which are all about healing, the healing touch of God's love. You know, Jesus can be called by many titles: Teacher, Savior, Redeemer, Lord, Prince of Peace, Friend, the Way, the Truth, the Life. But one of the greatest words we use about Jesus is that he was a healer. He came to this world because every human being needs some kind of healing. We're not complete without his love and without himself, Jesus our Lord. And when we hear about stories like we heard about in today's gospel, the healing touch of his love is meant to be more than just physical. Now look at what happened in today's gospel. Jairus is the synagogue official. He comes, Lord, come to my house. My little daughter is dying. You can save her. And because of his compassion, he immediately sets out for the house of the synagogue official. And he's on his way when he's stopped by a woman who's been suffering physically from hemorrhages for years. The gospel says she spent all she had and nothing improved, and she had faith. And she said, if I just touch his clothing, I'll get well. And it happened. And as Jesus felt healing power go out from him, he turns to her and he says, your faith has saved you. And then he proceeds on to the house of the synagogue official. They tell him he's too late. The girl has died. No, he said. No. She's just asleep. And he takes this 12-year-old by the hand and says, arise. And she comes back to life and to health. She's healed. Well, all of these healing stories, and we know there's many others, healing the leper, making the blind see, making the deaf hear. All of his healing stories are meant to remind us that he wants to heal every human being in whatever way we need it. Maybe you and I don't need physical healing because we're not physically ill. But there are times in our lives when we might need healing from loneliness. And someone comes along and offers friendship and we are healed. Maybe we need healing from some kind of sadness. And someone comes along and tries to cheer us up and help us to see light in the darkness. Maybe we need healing from some kind of discouragement or sadness or distress. And someone comes along offering to help, and that person heals us. See, I believe the healing work of Jesus is our work as his followers. Maybe we're at odds with someone. Maybe I've had an argument and disagreement, and forgiveness is necessary. Or maybe I have to say, I'm sorry. That's a healing moment. I think of my own mother in this parish. She was a Eucharistic minister. She considered it such an honor to give out communion at Sunday Mass. But you know what she liked even more? She loved to bring communion to the homebound, to those who were sick, to encourage them with God's love. She used to say to us, don't ever call me on Tuesday. She said, that's when I bring communion to the elderly. I said, Ma, didn't you tell me the lady you're bringing communion to is 69? And she said, yes. And I said, Ma, you're 81. What do you mean bringing communion to the elderly? But that's what she loved to do. It was the healing touch of God's love. And you and I can be healers. And so when the gospel tells us that today, that Jesus invites us as his followers to bring the healing touch of God's love to others, I think of my coming here and joining you as a member of this parish as joining you in the healing ministry of Christ. You know, I know a few people, some people knew my mother, some people at Mass this morning were telling me they went to school with my younger brothers and sisters. But I hope to get to know this parish as best I can, and I hope to be of service to our pastor, Father Frank, and to all of you. And that service is very much about healing. We live in a world, unfortunately, where there's a lot of division, there's a lot of distress, there's a lot of kind of people at odds with each other. The healing of Christ needs to happen over and over again. We need to be patient. We need to be forgiving. We need to be understanding. And I struggle with that just as we all do, trying to say the right thing. But every time we are able to decide how to love, I think we make the healing of Jesus happen again. We make the world a better place. We make it come a little bit closer to being the kingdom of justice and peace that God created the world to be. And I have to tell you that words fail me right now in saying how happy I am to join you in this parish and to be part of your community. As I already mentioned, I have such great memories of all the years here. Even after I became a priest and was in 6 other parishes on Long Island, I would hear stories from my mom about Father Aaron and how much she loved him, and especially Father Zachary Callahan, how much she loved him and how wonderful he was. I said, well, Father Callahan has that effect on everyone, you know. But as I say, words don't adequately express how happy I am to be here, standing here where my first Mass was, and being able to take up a ministry. I know I'm 76, but I don't feel that old at all. I feel kind of ready to go, you know, ready to serve, continue to serve. They use that word retirement. I'm just retiring from the official position of being a pastor, but I'm happy not to retire from priesthood. And maybe to describe what I think my arrival here is about, I could use an image. Several years ago, one of my younger brothers and his wife adopted a child from Russia. They had to fly 12 hours to get over to Russia, to the orphanage where the child lived. And the director of the orphanage prepared my brother and sister-in-law. They said, this is a little boy who's 18 months old, year and a half. We're going to allow him to come into the room and meet you. And they said, you know, there's no guaranteeing what his reaction to you will be because you're strangers. So the 2 of them are sitting there, and this little 18-month-old Alexander walks in the room, and he walks up to the 2 of them, and after a few seconds, he just goes like this. And my sister-in-law instinctively picked him up, and he put his head on her shoulder, and he fell asleep. And my brother said to me, our decision was made at that moment. This is our son. And the reason I just tell that little story is to say, I kind of feel like I'm being adopted into a new parish, and I'm delighted to be adopted. I'm delighted to be part of this community, which in the few days I've been here is so obvious. So much good is going on. Even this Mass, family liturgy, there are children here. I get to invite them up to the altar, around the altar at the Eucharistic prayer. There's so many ways we can touch each other with love. There's so many ways we can heal each other. I am very conscious of the fact that I've talked way too long already, and I promise on future Sundays my homilies won't be this long, but I'm kind of overflowing with a feeling of gratitude that God has called me here to serve. So let's return to God's table, to the altar where Jesus is present, because he is the healer. And the Eucharist empowers us to heal others in this coming week. That healing power of God's love, that healing power of God's love is the basis of our faith. So now let's profess that faith together.